the last, certainly not the least talk today, build yourself a risk assessment tool. Please welcome Vlado Lukla.
Hi. I was given a task to finish you off for tonight, so you've seen a lot of math and crypto, and this is going to be very easy, right? I'm not a programmer, I'm not a coder, but I also seen the next door presentation, which is about IT security is fucked up. Why is it so? And I would say this is the same topic. I could really rename the presentation as risk assessment is fucked up, because this is really the situation today. So very shortly about me, I've been doing security for maybe 20 years. Last close to 16 years, I was a security manager for a telco operator until very, very recently, like 2 weeks ago. And at the same time, I was a risk manager and a personal data officer. So I was in a situation when I really needed to do some risk assessments, and a lot of them. And I was not really happy with the methodologies and tools I've seen around. To me, they really suck. Some of them really suck. So the goal of tonight's presentation is to show you that you can do it yourself. You just need few things to know about that, then you are off to do a perfect tool. My tool is based on Wiki. It's pure HTML. So the first question to ask is, do we need another tool or your own tool? Do you need to have your own tool? And I say maybe not. Maybe if you do risk assessment regularly and you do it in a big company and you have a team of people and you have a full-time job for this, and you already work with something like Octavi or Keras or whatever, then you may not need anything. But in my case, which may be similar to your case, I was the only one. I had 10 people, but I was the only one who did risk assessment. So when I look at the methodologies, I said, I don't like this. I don't want to talk about fax machines or cables. I want to talk about maybe web security or just part of it. So the long answer is the presentation. So if you're alone with it, you don't know where to start, maybe this is going to be a good example for you now. For me, the disadvantage of ready-made tools, and there are plenty of them, maybe 20, 30. Many of them are single user. Many of them are single assessment case, so you go one by one. Most of them are Excels, you know. And those that are really sophisticated ones, you know, web and multiple users, can be very expensive or pretty expensive. Yeah, I've seen the prices are around 10, 20, 30,000 euro per tool. So like Octavi or Proteus, especially Proteus. And those who are coded in Java, because there are many nice examples of this, or using the PC desktop runtimes for database like Microsoft Access, are fixed. You cannot really change anything in them. So you need to depend on the provider to change something, and this I didn't like. If you have your own tool and you build it up yourself, you first have a full control, right? You do all the functionality and all the content. And really you can put anything you need into the tool. And I'll show it to you later on in the second part. For me, it became more than just a risk assessment. For me, it became a part of ISMS, Information Security Management System. Because all these compliance frameworks talk about risk assessment. It's like a first thing to do. So for me, it's a part of integral system, which relates incident audits, even KPIs for staff, what they're supposed to do this year. And also, if you use accessible technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, then it's all under your nose. You can do anything with this. And I can tell you again, I'm not a programmer. I programmed in 80s in COBOL, and I was not a good one. So if I can do it this way, you can do it as well. One of the things is your tool will not become obsolete because you have everything under your nose. It's everything in your hands. So this presentation is not about any new stuff, any breakthrough in risk assessment. It's pretty common and pretty common sense. I'm not going to talk about any methodology, which one is good and which one is bad. There is no single good methodology for everyone. And that's one of the key points. You have to understand that your company may be different from the others. Usually it is. And I like the research. I like all these smart guys talking about, breaking crypto. And there are also, researchers doing the risk assessment stuff. And it's nice to read, but very difficult to use. Especially if you're in a company like I used to be. And this is a big international company. And, the simple problem you have every day is you don't know who is responsible for an asset. How can you do risk assessment without knowing this? And you don't know who approves access. And this is the real company. This is really far from books, because in the book everything is ideal. It's perfect. In the real company, and I was part of a top management, so I sat down with the directors every week, and I understood their thinking. It's far away from security, So for me, security is something which can be practical. You need to know some theories, but the practice is better. And I try to do it this way all the time. For me, there is no problem with understanding methodologies because those are clean. I mean, easy stuff. This is not about RSA, right? But let's try to, if you want to take a look at some of them, it's not that easy to use them, the tool and methodologies. The terminologies are different, and, they're not compatible. They're not mapped against each other. So for me, there is no single best approach. That's why I created my tool, because I thought this is going to be the best for me and my company. So I try to simplify everything. I try to do something like good enough, quick, good enough, because next day I have another risk assessment, or next week. I don't have time to do a week-long or 2 weeks long exercises with people. So for me, what really matters is what makes and breaks security in any given case. And we look at methodologies, they start with A and end up with Z, going through, as I said, fax machines, cables, and everything, buildings, and even asteroids, maybe. I don't have time for asteroids. I need to make sure that tomorrow the system will go into production and with some basic stuff checked, right? For me, this was kind of a discovery. For me, not the result of the risk assessment, but the journey to get these results is more important. Because you might be surprised. Risk assessment is normally a session, 1, 2, 3 sessions with people. And you start asking questions, and they're supposed to do something, and you ask them, do you do this? And they say, yeah, we do. And they say, okay, show me an example of a lock. What do you got in the lock? Or what was the latest time you patched something? So then you realize something you expect works does not work at all. The following standards, yeah, I wrote like maybe 30 standards. I think people read them and use them. You have to be specific and ask. Some people may know, some people will not know. So when you repeat the process, and I was doing this for quite a couple of years, you understand after some time, it's not 1 year, 2 year, which controls make sense to be part of ISMS. That means you check regularly without asking about risk assessment, and which one you put aside and you use them only when the case is the case. I have like 300 controls in my system. That's good enough. But still, I'm not using all of them for risk assessment. Of course, you can do risk assessment at several levels, and I will not be talking about business level, the high level. Even though I was a risk manager for a company, so I had to deal with all kinds of risks, not only security risks. But Most of the methodologies who explain how it works, they combine process and technical, which is the case with NIST standards or ISO standards. They consider both to be part of risk assessment. Normally, when you do it in a real company, you end up really with people, process, and technology risk, all kinds of interactions between those three. So if you're still looking for a ready-made tool, these are one of the best known, so you can take a look and see which one you like. But as I said, many of them are fixed. You cannot change anything. You have to wait for the vendor to update something. Many of them are old, which is surprising because very recently a GS tool, which is a German National Standard Institute for Security, so to speak, they talk about Windows 95 until 2012, I think. Windows 95, do you still have it? And also fax machines, and switches and hubs and stuff. So I found a recent comparison of these tools in Gartner this year. And what I like the best about this is the summary line, which is choose the method which suits you individual company. There is no best one. For me, mine is the best one, but and this is also interesting because despite all the scholars know about the risk, what it is, it's still a vague concept. It's so vague. I've read a research paper on how the basic formula, what is the risk, impact probability, is a nonsense. But there is nothing better in your real company. How can you start with basically, challenging the impact time probability, formula? What else can you do? I like this. Prediction is difficult, especially for the future, about the future, because this is really symptomatic for what we do. And the second one is even better. You know why? Because it's so difficult to predict what's going to happen next day with your product, with your web service, with your payment system. But as soon as it happens, like the incident, the hack, or misconfiguration, you start seeing how easy it was to prevent, how easy you can explain why it happened. There is no science. You just failed. You didn't do something you were supposed to do. So I like this because I've seen it many times. The past performance is the key. You look back and you see what happened to us, what happened to the next guy in the same industry, and you start learning. And then you can focus on things which make or break security. Again, I will not talk about fax machines maybe at all. So even the simplest assumptions you use in every methodology are wrong, because they assume people will do this or vendors will do that, and it's not happening. So how can you be sure that you did not miss anything when the baseline does not work? And I tell you, from the 20 years, the industry, like a telco, it does not work. The baseline does not work. You know why? Because the vendors used to sell boxes, without descriptions. Nobody knew what's in the box. If you follow some of the recent 2-3 years topics on telco, like clone of SIM cards and decrypting the GSM, or man in the middle attack for GSM, it's all because the vendors did not do their jobs many years back, and now it's coming, like 10 years or 8 years back, as a revenge. For me, the risk assessment, and this is not my invention, but I like this because I believe it's true, it's not a science, but it's a collective judgment. So you have this session with people, maybe 5, maybe 6, maybe 10. You sit 2 hours, you try to answer most difficult questions, and at the end you say, this is the verdict, this is the risk, and this is what we're going to do about this risk. It's not math, it's not like calculations. Even though the most methodology they use calculation, you've seen lots of tools in Excel, and they're great, but it's not in the calculation, the risk. It's about your context knowledge and your situation. So what do you need to do to build your tool? You need to have an approach. I like this thinking, the system thinking, because you can create completely own methodology. It's not, it's not difficult. But how then you compare to others? You think people would understand when you have created something just for yourself? So I use framework for the ISO because this is what people know, not only in Europe, but also in the US. I don't know if you noticed, but Microsoft, the cloud version of the Office 365, is the only one which has this certification, which is, to me, is funny. They do ISO certificate, they have it. So even, in the US, they understand the ISO, the reason for ISO. So as a minimum, you need what? You need assets. You have it because you have inventory of your hardware, software, and stuff. But most of all, you need threats. You need the catalog of them. You need vulnerabilities, which are linked to threats. And then you need controls, which are linked to vulnerabilities. And this is what I did. Very simple, but this is the core. And nice to have features. You want to have a register of risk and risk treatment plans, and you want to have references because sometimes the procedure, the policy is the control. Okay? And also statistics on incidents and past performance. If you don't have it, how can you make sure that you know what you talk about? And of course, for the management, you need to have reports and say, you see the trends, you see this, do you see this color? This is what's going to happen to us next year, maybe. If you're looking for a book to start with, to get in, I recommend this one because this will introduce you to all the concepts from Database. And of course, there are lots of methodologies which will guide you through the selection of threats. I found one which is kind of old, but I didn't find anything better, which is for open secure architecture. They try to compare all the threat catalogs which were on the market at the time. And then there are some specific, like from the banking industry, the BIT. They have like 600 threats. The catalog, you can look at it and say, I like this one, I'm going to use this one, and then I will use it in my tool. And Information Security Forum has only 40 threats in their Excel tool. And also NIST has some example, and BSI has a huge one, or 370 something with Windows 95 until 2012. So I used the ISO 27005 as my framework. I expanded this one. And this one, the simple cable, I don't know the guy, but this looks very smart, what he did. If you want to start with this. The same with sources of vulnerabilities. You would like to start with something and then expand on it. These are the, again, main three sources you could use. Besides the internal sources, which is, again, your past audits, your past findings. And then I tried this one from the CVE because it has a very nice searching tool. That means if you're interested into, let's say, authorization bypassing, vulnerabilities, you can get expired and use this as a vulnerability you would like to have in your system. Can be generic, can be specific. Very similar for source of control because most of these methodologies, they give you examples how the T, V, and Cs are supposed to be created. Specifically, OWASP does this for web, of course. I do have few for web, but as you will see later on, I'm not focusing on any specific web vulnerabilities, but again, when I started to do this, it was like 2006, maybe. I looked at many options, and I realized I need something I can work with, which is not limiting me, which is not, doesn't have a limits on right to use or change. And I like to see it. I don't like the compiled programs. I like scripts because this is what I can look at and change. Of course, if you look at, and I'll give you example later on, at possibilities, you look for tools or technologies which you have a huge base, thousands of users, dozens of developers, the guys who create stuff. And of course, I don't want to be, I don't need an MIT degree for be able to do this. So when I was looking at this some years back, I thought Wiki is a good alternative, and then also some CMS, because if you look at today's Drupal or Alfresco, those are wonderful systems to store information, because my risk assessment tool is more about knowledge management. It's not Excel. It's about knowing the context, and this given session we say this is the risk, because this is all the information we could gather today, and this is what we think is dangerous. And there is a specific version of Wiki, which is called TiddlyWiki. Some people call it Wiki with a funny name, but there is a genius behind this called Jeremy. His name is Jeremy Ruston. He wrote this in 2005, I believe. It was a single HTML file which could save itself through JavaScript. There was a code inside, CSS inside, and of course data records inside. And you could have a browser which would let you create links and file and records called tiddlers, and will save itself. After many years of improving security in browsers, it's not possible anymore to save HTML through browser. So I had to switch to something else, which is today HTML5, which will let you do it. Okay, so my version is the database version because I needed more users, distributed environment, and there is a MySQL database behind this. So where the records are stored. The best thing about this is you create relationship yourself from the browser, and you will see. I just use 3 fields in a record: title, body, and tags. And through these 3, I can create a lot of relationship on the fly without having a database schemes or index or something, because as soon as you have a tag, a link to title, it's the same tag as a title, it's linked automatically, right? You will see it maybe later on, and you understand. The other good thing is you can have the record, which you can see as a line, you have an ID, title, tags, and so on. One line, one record can contain another script, which you'll call another record, right? So when you open up the record, it will do what's written inside. So you can have a content as a text or picture or a script. And the script will collect the data from other records under your filters or whatever you want. So, and this is the last one before I go to the live demo. One of the questions I had to face a long time ago was how much calculation I want to be built into the tool. Because, as I said, it's the risk assessment will not become better because you have great calculations in there or some formulas in there. And when I try to do this in the ISF way, which is they have a tool called IRAM. It's a nice Excel, calculates everything. When I look at the result, I understood that people will play with it as long as they get a good result. You know what I mean? They're clicking on the answers until they get a very good result for the risk assessment. That means no problems. Very simple. So I purposely have a subjective verdict. So this is all the information we collected, and this is your verdict to this information. It's you who makes the decision. It's not the tool who will calculate the score for you. It can be done, but I don't like it this way. So, so now I go to the tool, and I have to remind you that even though it's a demo, it's an experimental tool. It still contains a lot of real data from Orange. So I'll try to mutilate the data, so it's not like there are pieces which are real, pieces which are fake, but at least it will give you a example how it could work in real life. Because a lot of this is I didn't have time to fix everything, and there are real names of people, real system names, but it's kind of mixed up. Okay. So I start with this. This is the wiki. You see it's running on a local server. It's MySQL and Apache. And I'm going to show you the tool, how it looks like. And then if I have time and you have questions, I can show you how the things are linked and how they are created, because, I mean, like behind the scene. But before I do that, I'd like to show you first. So as I said, I use more or less, I use the concept of knowledge management for the risk. So I try to collect all these pieces of information, because for me and for the team, this is where we need to know before we say something is risky. So the team would collect and answer all these questions about, you know, where it is, what it is, and so on, okay? And I'll try to collect some architecture, you know, description of, you know, where it's, regardless of networks or a third-party support and so on. And then what I do very simply, I just mark it as a critical part of architecture is, let's say, web or crypto or database or cloud. Because later on when I have the vulnerabilities linked, I will see which one are supposed to be related to web, for example. Okay. So I collect all these, and these are the names. So you see, this is procedural part of it. So we basically ask, do you have a performance management for this? Do you have a problem management? You know, if it's a big company, it's always yes, because they don't do it just for this, they do it for everything. But you need to know specifically who is responsible for this. So when I have a question about our control, I need to ask the right person, okay? And of course, then assets. Because I used to be a personal data manager and a risk manager. For me, the data is the most important part of every product or service. And specifically for telco, you need to know about these, for example. You know, telco is regulated and heavily regulated. So it's not only personal data, it's also telco data. Who calls who? Where the guy is now. Because we know, as the operator, where the guy is with the phone. So all these things need to be looked at and asked, do we collect this? And then you say, why do we collect this? No, you don't want to collect this. Why? Anyway, so you go through this, and I'll show this very briefly. As you see, I don't use a long list of hardware, software inventories. I don't need this. I try to have a top-down view of how expensive it is. What is so critical about the solution? What can go wrong? Like maybe it's a specific server or you know, application which was done, you know, just for us. Okay, so then I go through stuff and so on and so on. And again here, another highlight from the point of view of assets. So I look at data, hardware, software, sites, staff, and third party. Okay. This is again subjective. There is nothing in here is calculated yet. I decide with the team what's the key part of the solution or a product. And then you do like scenarios. Both can go wrong. What is the objective? What we need to protect? You say personal data, you see spoofing, you see available, you know, SLA or something like this. Then you do a brainstorm. You ask people from the project, what is the key business risk? What is the key project risk? And so on. Again, and then you look at past incidents. You see, oh, there was a goods taken by the fake customer. How it happened? Okay, so you have all these collected. You may have a diagram, like this is example of an e-shop, a real one. And you can ask, you see the orange rectangle is the scope of a risk assessment, not outside, okay? And then, again, this is something because the company has a quality system, we have forms for everything. So we ask about these things because this will calculate the score for like a risk index. I call it risk index. And again, none of the tools you can look up, you know, for risk assessment, we'll talk about law enforcement or CDR's records. This is telco specific, okay? So when I click here and I answer all these questions, I get some score, and the more I get, the more risk it can bring in the end. Anyway, so and then I have 5 categories of impacts: financial, customer, regulation, reputation, availability. And again, we together as a team say, yes, this is low, yes, this is high because of something. And then in the end, this is the highlight of everything. So this is the ISO structure, ISO 27005, threat categories. As you can see, most of the time, I don't use natural events. I don't care about volcanic phenomenon or something. But I have it here because I'm compatible with ISO. And the orange is certified for 27001 since 2009 or 10. So what I do here with the team, I said, which one is important for the case? Disclosure, eavesdropping, tampering, or something? So when I click, then I get the list now of individual threats in the next tab, which is called abuse of rights. And these are the vulnerabilities which are linked to this threat. As you can see, one threat can use or abuse several vulnerabilities, and several controls can fix the same vulnerabilities. So it's like one to many and many to many relationship. And the icons are only to signalize that if it's a database, this is the asset view and this is the architecture view, then I have to look at these lines where I have these checks. That means these are pre-selected, so it's everything. Every time you start a new one, you get all these pre-selected. And when you don't want this one, you don't want any one of these, you just unclick it, and it will not show in the next screen related controls. And the last part is controls. So they will take a little bit longer because it's all dynamic. It's being calculated. It's being to be recalculated now. You see, it took a few seconds or seconds. Also this one. So the actual verdict comes from this screen. So we sit and look at this and say, look, what about this? We have one control which is not done. We don't know about this. And 2 which are green. That means somebody looked at them. And then we say manually, how big is the threat? If everything is green, then the threat is low. The green means a lot of controls are done. So if I want to see again the controls, the names, and the details, the first one here is the patch is in place. And it's red. That means somebody did not check this one. Okay. So this is all again, as my knowledge management system, I record. And it's not me, it's maybe 20 people who record this let's say, we do it in 6 month rounds. But this is all, it has a control owner, which is someone, I cannot click on this okay. I don't normally use names, I use roles. So you see I have a job code for finance department, for HR, for IT, and for security and so on. So to make it short, all I do is I answer this screen and I set up this medium, low, whatever, based on the performance and controls, which are done all the year, not only for the risk assessment. When I don't have information, I consider this a high risk or high threat. That's it, okay? And then I do manual rating. So basically I count all the vulnerabilities I checked. These are the details of them. And I start identify risk and treatment to the risk. Let's say this is a risk which has 2 action plans. We call it RTPs, risk treatment plans, okay? So this was the manual, and this one is calculated. That means, in this case, the risk is 49% of total, like medium, okay? And again, this is all it does is 3 records, title, text, and tags. And I'll show it to you here because I think I created examples. So this is the concept. You have an asset, you have a thread linked to this, then you have a V-thread vulnerability linked to thread, and you have several controls which mitigate the vulnerability. But what we do is we do it collectively. We do it not only for the risk assessment, but we try to chase the controls all over the place and in a given time frame, which is 6 months. Then when we go to the risk assessment and we see the colors for the controls, we can say directly, oh, this is nice, this is done. And maybe we can investigate and ask detailed questions about the controls. But this way I can do the risk assessment for, like this one, eShop, which is medium-sized, let's say, solution, in 2 sessions for 2 hours. 4 people. Okay. So as you can see here, maybe this is a picture of how the records can be or are linked. As I said, what you do basically, you have a vulnerability code, which is part of a control, which is part of a type of threat, and which is a type of threat category. That's it. Only these 3 fields or attributes of record are used, nothing more. And to give you an example of how what's inside, this is inside. For example, this is, where is this? This is a Wiki syntax. This is a link to existing record, the square brackets. And this is CSS code, if I want to make a different color directly from the record. I can do it from different place. Okay. So, and this example is like, it'll show you that what I'm doing here is like very light SQL command saying, and this is all, those are macros which are part of the wiki. I did not code them. Actually, I didn't code anything. I'm using a plain TiddlyWiki with few plugins written by a few people. And using this, I can create an information system which will help me to identify risks. Simple. If I can do it, you can do it. Nice thing is it's open. You can look at inside like this. You can change anything. And as soon as you know how to, you have to stick to terminology, because if you use the tag differently, you will lose the link. If you don't use the same tag, so you have a glossary, you have a list of terms. If you don't use the list of terms, like a fixed one, then you will disrupt it. But let's say if I remove the DeepSec here, the tag, I will lose the link. Actually, this one is not a link, but you see, these are all the records which are tagged as for DeepSec. Very simple link created. So by using this, I can create links on the fly from the browser and have all these TVCs. If I screw it up here, I can fix it here. I don't need to go to the database. I use the database only for backups. Or if I need to do a massive update of something, like from the database side. But remember, this file can be used as a single HTML file with everything inside, including the charts. So I'm not using charts for the risks. I could. I'm using charts for, let's say, status of controls. Too big. This is a live. This is not a prepared report. It is like, we'll go through all these tags and put it together and present it in chart. That's it. I don't have a history of this. I have to take it out and put it aside and then come back. Anyway, time is up. And I know it's a lot of information, and the tool is difficult to present without, moving around. But the message for you is there is no best RA tool for everyone, and the best tool is the one you create yourself with your team. Then you are efficient and you don't have to spend time, because most of the tools I looked upon were like I had to spend 80% of time for things I don't use. I don't need to think about. And this way, you could create anything from the scratch. All you need to do is to understand a little bit of Wiki and the linking and syntax. You don't have to use CSS if you don't want to change, layout. So I've been doing this for maybe 8 years now, and I'm trying to put this also for security requirements for SDLC, like methodology of Stride, because it's so easy to build relationship and do for vendors, for providers of services, and you could basically use this as a contractual agreement with a third party that you have to go through this before we sign a contract with you. I did it a couple of times with big companies like Huawei or Alcatel or Ericsson recently. They didn't like it first, but then they say at the end, yeah, now we know what you're supposed to do. It's clear. You know what are the controls, what are the control owners and requirements. So it's much better than to put something in the contract which is, oh, you will comply with security requirements. Now you can do it this way, but when something happens, there is nothing you can use against the vendor. And this is very, very straightforward process. There is nothing hidden in there. But it takes time to get used to it. So thank you very much, and if you have questions, I'd be glad to answer any of this.
Questions?
Thanks for your talk. Short question. How long took it to make the whole structure in the wiki?
The first version is like maybe a week. But then you realize when you start using it that you would like to add this and link this and, like audit to be linked, incidents to be linked. So it didn't look this way all the time. So I would say I change it every 6 months to something I'd say better. But sometimes when I look at it, I say it's too much. It's like too much of the links and too much of the information in there. So I can tell you that when we went through the ISO certification, it helped tremendously. Because you don't have to, I didn't show you the procedures which are on policies there. The documents, full documents. We were able to do the certification in 2 days on site because they had access to this, the auditors. They were from different countries. So they just connected to the server with the password, and they look up and ask questions directly in the tool. So let's say for the control, they ask, do you do this way? Can we see a proof of whatever, print screen or something? So the guy who's responsible looked at the action question, and he answered the question directly to the tool. So when they came in physically on the site, they only have maybe 10 questions. So we spent a lot of time on the lunch, and we didn't have to rework because they got all the answers before they really came in. That's one of the, let's say, advantages of this. I like this to be transparent. I don't want, wait for the auditor to come and say, oh, maybe you'll ask me about something I don't know about. I need to have the answer before they ask. And most of the time, maybe 90% of the questions were answered directly from this place, because as I said, it's a ISMS, it's not only risk. Risk is a part of it, a big one, but it's not only a risk assessment, because I believe there is a conflict between, let's say, baseline or best practices, which is like 114 control from the ISO today, which you have to follow through all the scope you have in your company, and then doing a partial risk assessment. I say you should do risk assessment only for the parts which are not covered by the baseline controls. And for me, the baseline is more important than doing risk assessment for everything. As I said, from the incidents, 95 of our incidents were pure baseline. Nothing like a crypto, Uri was talking about PKCS or something. No, it's like admin, Oracle accounts, not patched for 8 years. By who? By Alcatel. How can you fix this? So put it in a contract. Have them pay for it. This is all you can do. But without having like objective reasons and ISO compliance, because if you're ISO compliance, you can say to Alcatel, you know what? If you don't provide this, we will not be compliant, and you will be fined for this. So you have a tool or a method how to push them, a vehicle for this. But as I said, this is not after NSA type of risk or terrorist or something. This is about baseline, and I tell you, 80% of the incidents or 90% are baseline configuration, basic stuff. The best incident is the one you don't know about, you never learn about. That's the best, incident for the hacker. All of these you could, when you see the incident, we were hacked many times, or several times, website. You look at the result and you see, but we knew about this. How come nobody responded to? So for me, this is 80% of work you have to do every day. And then you may have 20% of research and technical stuff, which in the end will not make it different. What makes it different is your team and your contextual knowledge of your environment. And this tool will help you to be systematic, not to forget about. Because from the charts you've seen, I could present it to the management and say, look, these are the trends. Which of the controls are not working, are the worst working? Never technical ones. Because I have MPT, which is managerial, procedural, technical controls. And the T's are always working. What is not working is the decision part, which is managerial. So the most of the controls that are not done are managerial ones or procedural, not technical ones. Because when the guy knows the technical part, like SSL or whatever, he will fix it. Vendor will fix it. But who is responsible for this and who will decide on this? This is difficult in a big company to do. So, sorry, thank you.
Okay. One last question.
Yeah, thanks for the good talk. Presumably, you're identifying a high number of risks, and you're only doing something about a subset of those risks. I guess that's a given, really. But what I was thinking was, do you ever worry that you'll identify something that you don't do anything about, and then that will happen in the field, and your company will look bad that it identified something but didn't actually do anything about it? Is that something you ever worry about, or is that not really a consideration?
This is a good point, because most of the time I know, for example, for this we will not have a treatment. You know why? Because this will require a new person. They will not give you a new person. You're done. You have to find another way. You can outsource, you can put it in a contract. The risk will be kind of a split or mitigated, but not directly solved. You try to play the game on the table with the vendor, for example, but I've seen it many times, and I use this again for the manager to make decision about the staffing. Now imagine this, we used to have, I'm not part of Orange anymore, they used to have 3 million customers, 10 people for security only, for physical, logical, procedural, and also legislation, because I was the personal data officer, telco officer. So there are at least two laws in every EU country about the confidentiality of personal data and telco data. And with 10 people, how can you manage 3,000 systems which are in the network? Only core network has like hundreds of systems. Every time you look at the box, like from the telco, which used to be black box, the Alcatel and so on, Telnet is used, everything is in clear text, passwords on the screen. All you need to know what is the IP. And there is another network which you may know about for the telco, which is the Signalization Network. Because today, everything even the voice goes through the packets like any internet traffic. But to make a call to establish, point to point, you need to send a signal saying, oh, he wants to locate the guy in Venezuela through GSM. And this Signalization Network, they call it interconnect or SS7 network, is not protected at all. Is not protected at all. And you know how it works. All the frauds, all the people calling for free, they go through a signalization, of course. And every guy who's in Africa and is selling SIM cards can do fraud to you. This is not internet. And this is like a Tesco supermarket. The thinking of the management of these companies is 100,000 euro is not big money, but the frauds are like 100,000 euros. I never had an incident which cost more than 10,000 in my security field, but frauds are 100,000 euros. So if they cannot fix this, how you expect them to fix 10,000 euro problem? I'm sorry to say that about telco, but this is how it is. And who pays? At the end, I mean, the customer will pay for sure, because actually the fraud for 100,000 euro for the telco forever is not 100,000, it's 10,000, maybe 20,000, the real cost, the interconnect. There is no real cost. It's only agreement between parties. So I really had to explain many times to the management, and when you ask how we can treat risks which are not treatable, well, they stay until the next incident. And then you come back and you put up the risk assessment to the management and say, look, I told you 3 years ago this is going to happen. They say, what is the damage? I said 50,000. 50,000 is nothing. So it's a tricky business, but I understood, I was part of top management, they have different problems, and openly they have different problems. If they lose, let's say they lose 1 million euro per month because of regulations, like interconnect charges, they were reduced drastically. So it's 1 million a month. You cannot come up to them and say, look, how come you don't change passwords? Or, it's matter of, but there are many risks will stay. And when I do risk assessment and I see something is improved, I try to find out why. Many times it's not because we did something, but because the vendor did something finally. Oracle, for example. So what I'm saying is not really in your hand that much, but you can affect it this way. But still, you are not covered. I'm sorry. It's far away from technical hacks or things. Really, in the real company, you do baseline and you see how the baseline fails, because you have nothing against the vendor. The last year there was a demonstration of, I think, 2 years ago in DEF CON, how you can steal the KI from the air, which is the ID, the key for the SIM card. If you have this key, you can create a same copy and you can call on behalf of the guy who is the original key. And it could be done from the air. And it took us 6 months to get the answer from the vendor, from Gemalto, if we are affected by this flaw. And the journalists and media were looking at the door and they wanted an answer. And we knew the answer because we were able to sniff the traffic and test a 3 DES, and it was a triple DES. We were not vulnerable to this. But we found out after like maybe a month of experimenting to do a home research, a vendor was not able to answer. And the final recommendation from the Paris, from the headquarters was talk to GSMA, which is a GSMA association. So you're a customer in my network, and all I can tell you is ask GSMA about the issue, because this is how they handle the case. So forward everyone to GSMA. Sorry, it took me too long, sorry.
Yeah, we're done for today. I hope you had a pleasant day listening to the very interesting talks, and you had got some homework to take home with you and think about. The talks tomorrow start at 9 a.m. in the morning. That might be night for some still. If you're a speaker, please come up to me for a moment. And thank you, Vlado Luknar, for this very interesting insights.